So today we're talking about the Tower of Babel. So to understand the Tower of Babel, we have to go back a little bit to the period of the Great Flood. Once the flood waters have receded and Noah and his family are safely on shore, they find themselves at a crossroads. Noah goes into depression and gets drunk one night, lies naked, or at least part naked, on the ground. His son Ham sees him, and Ham had really looked up to his father as a kind of hero. All the sons did, all three sons. But Ham, in particular, is scandalized by the sight of his father lying with his bottom half undressed, drunk on the beach. He decides that his father has fallen from grace and that it is up to him to take his father's place. How do we know that was his machination? It's pretty simple. He, instead of going to help his father or drawing a piece of clothing around him again to cover him up, he instead leaves him there in that state and then runs off to tell his brothers, "Did you know that Dad is drunk and he's lying half naked on the beach?" Now, you would only tell your brothers that without helping your father if you wanted your father's position for yourself. Thankfully, Noah's other two sons see through this ploy, and they go over and draw clothing over their father and help him get back on his feet. And that is when Noah decides that he will cut Ham off from the family. So Ham goes off into the wide open world, and he discovers that there are survivors of the Great Flood out there as well. And this is interesting because it suggests that maybe there was more than one ark, and that there were other arks in other places devoted to this similar task of preserving the good that was left in nature once the fallen angels and their offspring, the Nephilim, had begun to tinker with nature, a subject I discussed in a previous podcast. We know that there were little small pockets of civilization, and Ham worked his way into those pockets. He would have sons and grandsons of his own. One of those was named Nimrod. Nimrod ascended in his tribe. He was a great leader, and he was very persuasive and very good at getting people to do things his way. He was very, very intelligent. He decided that these tribes, these surviving tribes after the flood, needed to be brought together under him as the leader. To do this, he came up with an idea, the Tower of Babel. It would be this gigantic structure that was intended to bind all of the tribes together. The people of Babel had a curse placed on them, and they were unable to understand each other. And language fell apart, and so the project fell into a disarray, and there was a revolt, and all of the tribes disbanded. And we are not sure what happened to Nimrod after that. We do know that the Epic of Gilgamesh takes a lot of inspiration from Nimrod, which also suggests that the story of the Tower of Babel was not just an invention by the scholars and scribes in the time of King Josiah, who wrote the book of Genesis, eons after the stories of Genesis were first told, because otherwise it doesn't make sense that the Epic of Gilgamesh, which predates and would have predated the Josiah restoration by many, many centuries, would contain clear connections to Nimrod and his attempt at unifying the tribes. It means that the story of the Tower of Babel was part of the ancient Proto-Hebrew oral traditions and is not just something made up by Josiah scholars after the fact in order to make the kingdom of Babylon at that time look bad or come from a bad origin. So we can safely put that theory to bed, or at least cast it into the outer regions of speculation. That's where a lot of theories end up. What was at the top of the Tower of Babel, and why a tower? If Nimrod wanted to create this utopian society of all these different tribes, why didn't he just focus on housing, clothing, agriculture, roads, language? Why didn't he focus on those things? Why did he say, we got to build a tower? It's kind of odd. Even before building fortified walls to protect the people, nope, tower. When you build a tower, the most important thing, especially in the ancient days, about that tower is what you intend to do at the top of it. The top of that tower wouldn't be open to anybody. It would be open to him, and maybe some of his inner circle, his closest blood relatives. It's highly unlikely that the average peasant of Babel would have any access to the top of that tower. It's also strange that he had in his possession the knowledge of how to build this thing. So when Ham went off into the wilderness to meet up with other tribes, and we know that tribes prior to the flood had access to very strange technology, very strange knowledge that came from fallen angels who shared their knowledge with humanity in the hopes of becoming gods to humankind. Ham learned about how to build. People had very long lifespans during this period. They could live for centuries, according to the Bible. So that knowledge would have come to him in some form, and he would have passed on that knowledge, or it would have been built on by his descendants, of whom Nimrod is a part. So Nimrod would have had this arcane knowledge. Interestingly, it's Nimrod's design, his desire to bring all of these tribes together. And we can bet that some of these tribes would have been pretty far out. So not all tribes had the same access to demonic technology that others did. And it was Nimrod's design that these lesser tribes be brought into the fold so that they could receive the full benefit of this wonderful tech. And if you were a very, very simple savage person in those days, and you saw the kinds of tech that these people had, you would want to jump on board too. With this tower, with this demonic technology, what Nimrod is going to end up doing with the top of that tower is communicate with demons. Why does he want to communicate with demons? He wants more technology. He wants more power that comes from that to beguile the people of Babel. And then they will enhance the society and keep his family in power. The demons at this point have had their bodies destroyed because they did have physical bodies once they'd fallen, but with the flood, they are completely destroyed physically. So instead, now, being these angelic creatures that have turned to evil, when their bodies are destroyed, their souls can't go into heaven, and hell does not exist to them yet. It'll only exist when the crucifixion of Christ happens. So instead, they are prowling, not wandering, but prowling the earth, seeking the ruin of souls in a spirit form. So to get the drip feed of technology that Nimrod desires from demons, he has to have some kind of structure and some kind of power base from which he can begin the terrible, ugly, evil process of human sacrifice on top of the tower. Because as it says in the Bible, let us reach heaven by our own hands. What is it that the demons want to do? They want to reach heaven so that they can engage in a battle against God and the angels and become the rulers of the universe. Right? What was it that Ham wanted to do to Noah? He wanted to take over the family. He wanted to become head of the household. He wanted to become God to the family. And he had to be cast out. So Ham is a human form of a fallen angel. His story is like an allegory for the casting down of all of the bad angels from heaven. Likewise, Nimrod is trying to leverage contact with demons through the tower, through his super tribe, Babel, by using human sacrifice as a kind of currency method, as a summoning method, to bring the demons into contact with him so they can give him exclusive knowledge, because that's what demons want. They want the blood of innocence spilled, whether it means that you have Satan worshippers who torture animals, or harm children, or harm women, or harm other men, harm vulnerable people, homeless, drug addicts, whatever it is. Anybody who's in a vulnerable place can be misled in many cases of their own accord or their own ignorance. These are the people that demons go after or send their followers after. And they want them killed because those souls will add to the ranks of the demons. Because these are people that have, in one way or another, they have no defense against evil, or so the devil thinks. This is what Nimrod wants to do. He wants to create a platform from which he can do these human sacrifices. He can create a kind of priestly caste of demon worshippers, and they will be the ones that slaughter the innocent on a very slow, careful basis. You can imagine, as with most cultures that engage in these kinds of things, that people who are disabled or elderly or sick, people that are not as perhaps smart, even people that aren't disabled but are just not very intelligent, also on the chopping block. Okay, this is what he wants to do, and the whole project falls apart. This is prefiguring so much, and it explains so much today about what's going on. I would invite you to think about connections between creating a small enclave of evil people to harm the innocent, and look at some of these bizarre governments that are showing up today that love the idea of abortion, they love the idea of euthanasia, they love the idea of eliminating members of the race that they deem unfit to live. Iceland, Denmark, the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, one of the worst swears or slurs you can put on somebody, the worst insult you can give somebody, is to say they're disabled. There is a cultural understanding of people with disabilities in many parts of the world that should rightfully sicken us if we care about right, wrong, the fate of the human race, to ensure that everybody is treated with fairness and dignity. A priestly caste that wants to sacrifice its members for the sake of gaining more knowledge about things of the world is a very sick place to be, and it's a very sick thing to support. And we have to be extremely vigilant and careful not to throw our weight behind these organizations and institutions that claim to know what's best for us, when really what they're just interested in is dominating us. The best defense against this is to pray steadfastly to the one who cast the demons into hell to ruin the level of impact they have on the world, and that was Jesus Christ. This has been a fun talk. I hope you enjoyed it. God bless. Have a great day.